So-called Plan B that I mentioned at the start of this show. I do feel that we've all been quite distracted recently, and this whole kind of public consultation has gone live now, and I fear that not a lot of people know about it, and you should know about it because the consequence of this will be quite deep depending on your perspective. I personally am quite uncomfortable with the notion that actually, you're going to start demanding, right, you can only come in here and you can only do this if you've been vaccinated. It makes me uncomfortable for a variety of reasons, not least, as I was explaining in the start of this programme, because people can still transmit and catch COVID if they're vaccinated anyway. And all of these bizarre exemptions, whether it's a job title exemption or an activity exemption, that makes no sense to me. So joining me to discuss this is the MP, Steve Baker. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Michelle. Thanks for having me on.
Steve, I personally am very opposed to this Plan B. I worry about it enormously, and I fear where on earth is all of this going to end? But I wonder, what is your view on this?
We should certainly oppose vaccine passports. I'm implacably opposed to them. I'll certainly vote against them if a vote comes to the House of Commons, and I'll encourage other colleagues to join me in saying no. But I have to accept that if the Labour Party doesn't oppose the government, then the government will get its way. And that's a real worry because Labour have effectively been absent throughout this crisis on civil liberties. And let's face up to what this is. If we had vaccine passports, it would be a two-tier, papers, please society, one which discriminated against some of the most marginalised groups in our society. So I'm implacably opposed. I think the government should scrap all plans for vaccine passports in Plan B. The only good news I can think of really is that looking at the ONS data, vaccines have so transformed the situation that I really don't think the government will be pushing on to their Plan B.
Yeah, and I have to say, Steve, that one of the concerns I've got, because I've completed this consultation, I didn't actually like the wording or the suggestions on a lot of the questions. It seemed almost steered towards that the decision was already made, and now it's just about how we do it, as opposed to should we be doing this or not. But you mentioned there about almost a two-tiered society. I worry that we're creating almost like a subclass. So there's a question that really caught my eye in this consultation, which is, if someone, a worker, has to have a test instead, should they be supervised? I mean, it stopped me in my tracks. Is this the level now that we're getting to, that you're going to now start standing over somebody whilst they take a test because basically you don't trust them?
Well, it's appalling, isn't it? And I agree with you. We shouldn't be going down this path. It's not the way I want our society to be. People shouldn't need to present their health status at all to go about their ordinary occasions. But let's remember what the government's proposing here on Plan B is in relation to things like nightclubs and large gatherings of people. But I think it has to be the time when we say to people, if you're daft enough, say you're my age and you're still going to nightclubs and you're daft enough to do it without being vaccinated, that's your choice. And I do say daft enough because if you're my age, 50 plus, and you're not vaccinated, you are at risk from COVID in a way that younger people are not so much. And so, it really should be your choice. The vaccination levels we've now achieved, I think, do allow us, you can see it in the data for the way that cases now are not leading to the level of hospitalisation and death we saw in previous waves. I think it is now time to say it's people's free choice what they do because vaccination is working. So like you, I'm appalled at this idea of treating people differently based on health status. We shouldn't do it. And in a free society, we should be not only the government stepping back from it, we should also be banning it in the private sector. And I have to say, when Nadeem Zahawi first replied to me on this subject in a debate, he strongly encouraged businesses not to do this and see how far we've come. So I think it's time for the Conservative Party to stand up for freedom and rights, to accept the vaccines work and to back away from all these plans.
Yeah, and also, we say about health status, but one of the things that I'm intrigued by is if indeed this is all about, people have to have the vaccine, i.e. an antibody reaction to COVID, why is natural immunity completely getting ignored in the government's plans?
Well, that is a great question which should be put to ministers and to scientists. I freely admit that I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not a biological scientist. I do my very best, and at least this far, I have not been pulled up by fact checkers, which I hope you won't mind me saying I'm quite proud of. So I'm a bit reluctant to venture into an area which is not my specialty. But what I would say is that I do recognise that people can have immunity through multiple routes. And I think that the government should be looking at antibodies as well. It's very notable that in Plan B, they go over to vaccine-only certification. They don't accept test results or antibodies. And I think that's wrong. It does seem to me a pretty clear, particularly given the settings that they list, a pretty clear attempt to coerce young people to get vaccinated. And again, that's not the society I want to live in. We should be explaining to young people the choice they face, the relative risks each way, and be encouraging them to do the responsible thing and not coercing them.
Yeah, so we both agreed. But in answer to the question of how do we help the NHS or prevent the NHS if it reaches unsustainable pressure, which is the direct quote that they're trying to avoid, what do you suggest then if we don't do this?
Well, our civil liberties shouldn't be one of the tools of NHS capacity management. The state should make other plans. Remember where we started at the beginning of this crisis. We were flattening the curve for a few weeks so the NHS could be prepared to cope. Now, government changed course, I understand, because they worked out that the public were not as fatalistic about high numbers of deaths as they originally thought. I advise that's why there was a change of course. But now we're here with vaccines that work. Really, all you can do by locking society down once again is push off the point at which people who aren't vaccinated end up sick and going to hospital. And really, that's something they've brought on themselves now if they're not vaccinated. And they've made that choice. Anyone listening to this will know I'm recommending to them that they should be vaccinated. Well, they make their own choice. But if they take their own choice, they take their own consequences. And the rest of us shouldn't be locked down as a result. So I'm very clear that, civil liberties, fundamentally, things like the ability to see your family, this should not be a tool of NHS capacity management. And I think anyone who says that it should be really has lost sight of our ultimate values.